Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. My name is Troy Arthur. I'm a director in academic and membership affairs, and I want to welcome everyone to this session that we have today. We are, as many of you know, looking at issues related to the institutional performance program. Many of you are familiar with the institutional performance program. For those who are not, it is a program that is run by the NCAA where we provide data and information to institutions in a number of key areas. Our purpose today is to provide you with rich content related to best practices and things that you all can do at your campuses and conferences as it relates to student athletes. Today's session is called Academic Program Development for Student Athletes, Educational Opportunities for Career Success. And joining me today is Fox Trio from Hanover Research and Cheryl Hemphill from St. Leo University. So thank you both for joining me. What I'd like to do is to start off by giving you a little bit of background about our two presenters today. So Fox serves as managing director for higher education research advisory team at Hanover. His expertise is in the area of higher education. He works to provide strategic research guidance to members of our institutional research groups across the country. Fox has been with Hanover for a number of years, and before joining Hanover, he graduated from Indiana University and assisted with development of their strategic plan. While at IU, Fox achieved his PhD in higher education and strategic management, and he also was involved in a joint venture with the School of Education and Kelley School of Business. So welcome to Fox. Secondly, we have Cheryl, who has been at St. Leo for 10 years, where she currently works as an analyst in the Office of Assessment and Institutional Research. Cheryl is a strong proponent of using data to drive decision-making on respective campuses. While she works in many areas in the area of institutional research, her primary role is market research. She was a major contributor to the development of the new program approval process at the university and works with a number of programs that advocate for overall process, including market research and data. So to both of my colleagues and friends here, I want you all to wish them a warm welcome, and I will turn it over to Fox. Thank you, Fox.
Thanks so much. Hi, nice to see everybody. I am Fox, as you probably have guessed. We're happy to jump into our session today. As Troy already told you, the overarching theme is about academic program development for student athletes. So I'm going to jump ahead. Here's our information about who we are after that great introduction from Troy. But let's dive right into the content. I would imagine that many of you were like me and the countless millions across the world who watched the absolutely fabulous return of March Madness with the NCAA basketball tournament. And my congratulations to both Stanford and Baylor on their victories. And during those proceedings, there was a television ad reminding the public of a statistic that I know you are all aware of. 98% of student athletes will not progress into a professional sports playing career. So when the NCAA met with Hanover Research to discuss potential topical areas to share with you all today, we thought about that number and its many implications at an institution. And the lens we thought it would be interesting to examine the student athlete world through was that of academic development. This in turn led to the research questions you now see before you and comprise the crux of what Cheryl and myself will be discussing today. Essentially, how institutions can serve those individuals by ensuring the academic portfolio has opportunities that are viable and feasible for student athletes. So with that background, here's the basic agenda for the session. We're going to start by giving a high-level overview of the methodologies we recommend using to answer these questions. Then, because we actually performed step one of our proposed research process, we're going to show you the results of the preliminary scan of academic program opportunities, including the associated data. And for the latter half, we'll discuss best practices, including what next steps you would take to continue the assessment process, including some real-world examples. So let's begin with that high level overview. How does one approach these academic development questions? Well, when I think about evaluating an academic program and whether or not it's going to quote unquote work at an institution, I'm a real big advocate for analyzing a variety of data sources and utilizing a mix of research methodologies. Let's assume we're starting from scratch. My general philosophy is to start by analyzing secondary data at a macro level. Leverage the information that is already available to set a foundation. Once everything's contextualized, we then recommend examining those opportunities with more secondary research, but this time with a focused approach. And Cheryl's going to give a real great example of that, what it could look like later in the presentation. And then after all that secondary research, if there is still ambiguity or knowledge gaps, or said differently, if the answers to those research questions are still fuzzy or mixed, attempt to address them with primary research, the creation of knowledge when it does not yet exist. Now, today, we're going to be focusing mostly on the secondary research methods. I've given you that high-level philosophy. Now let's talk about step one, which is basically like an environmental scan. When broadly evaluating potential programmatic opportunities, I'm curious about two basic vectors: student demand and labor market demand. Or said differently, do students want to enroll in this program, and will graduates get jobs? When doing secondary analysis looking at these factors, the most reliable indicators is historical data, looking at trends over time in order to get a sense of the future. In the case of student demand, we recommend analyzing degree conferral rates to see which programs individuals are gravitating towards or away from. And you can get that information from IPEDS, which is the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, courtesy of the U.S. Department of Education. For labor market data, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a good, reliable source of predicting which industries are on the rise or in decline, as well as forecasting job opportunities in various related industries. Now, before I go any further, I want to address something about these sources that I am certain someone is wondering in their brain right now. How much faith can we put into those historical numbers given this little thing called COVID that came along and caused a bunch of turmoil? How accurate can that data still be? And I have two quick answers to that. First, those numbers are still very, very good indicators. They are completely worthwhile if used properly. And by that, I mean they provide great guidance, but not necessarily great conclusions. Which leads me to my next point. You'll remember I talked about leveraging a mix of methodologies. This is exactly why. Pulling in other data through either secondary or primary research means to address any volatility that perhaps has yet to be reflected in IPEDS or in the BLS data. So, okay, let's move on from that. Let's suppose you collect this data related to student and labor market demand. What do you do next? You organize it. Remember, at this phase, we're thinking about identifying programmatic opportunities and then performing a comparative assessment of them. So you'll see on this chart how we conceptualize the categorization of programs across the previously mentioned vectors. In this case, growth on the y-axis is a reference to the labor market, and volume on the x-axis are the degree conferral rates representing student demand. And this gives us four quadrants: emerging, high growth, low growth, and established. I think these names are pretty self-explanatory, and plotting the data, hopefully you can get a sense of how it would provide an indication of how academic programs are generally faring in the market. And this is a good time to reiterate that this data plotting exercise is something that can be done for new programs, existing programs, or a combination of both. And it's a tool that can be used at various academic levels: undergraduate, graduate, et cetera. So now that you have all that context, let's apply it a little bit more specifically to the research results we're going to show you. We began by thinking, okay, what academic fields do we believe student athletes might be interested in if they want to keep some element of sports in their career path? And quite transparently, this is a little bit subjective, right? We did some cursory research on the fields we think student athletes gravitate to, but make no mistake, we're not stating that all of those individuals end up picking the academic programs we're about to highlight. Instead, we just wanted to spotlight some ones or examine some ones or look into some ones we simply felt made sense. And this started with 10 general fields: sports management, exercise science, physical therapy, occupational therapy, journalism, public relations, facilities management, event management, marketing, and communications. And then obviously all the subfields within those broader level fields. So we went to IPEDS and we pulled the conferral trends for all those fields from 2015 to 2019. Then, because every academic program has a unique identifier associated with it, that's known as the SIP code, or the Classification of Instructional Programs code, we can then crosswalk those programs with the Bureau of Labor Statistics standard occupational classification system, SOC code, if you're familiar with that term, to say, okay, for program A, what are its related jobs and what is the outlook for those jobs over the next several years? And that's how we are categorizing programmatic opportunities and their magnitude. And when you take all that data and you run all that data, you get output that looks like this. Now, my apologies if all these colored bubbles don't make immediate sense. And so I'm going to walk you through this at a high level, and then we're going to get into more detail on some summary slides. This is like the visual overview. But this is representative of the actual data and categorization, not an example. So later on, we're going to talk about things you could do later to build on this data. But for the purposes of the next several slides, this is all real data. To confirm, the circles represent various academic programs. And if they are dark green, like marketing and PR, they are growing and growing fast. If they are light blue, they are emerging, like occupational therapy. And dark blue, like journalism, and you'll see there in the lower left, I believe, they're established. And then the size of the circle is indicative of sort of the intensity of that opportunity. Again, I promise I'll be getting more into this in a moment, so I'm going to just move on to the next set of visual results. And this is a little more sparse, so hopefully it's a little bit easier to read. The same basic rules apply, though, right, in terms of circle size and coloring, but now there are new categories. Where the last slide was highlighting the programs that scored really well across both student demand and their labor market demand growth, these programs had more of a mixed outlook. Now, this could be because we see a decline across one of the vectors, as is the case for facilities planning and management, or just comparatively, the growth isn't as strong when looking at these next to the other ones we include in the analysis. But let's translate all these data circles to something a little bit more palatable. Here's what I imagine most of you are curious about. From my analysis, what fields and jobs have the most positive outlook? Well, at the undergraduate level, you can see really good things for sport management, marketing, and public relations. And note that it says development under the categorization, but this doesn't just mean create a new if you don't have it. It also could be an indication that maybe an existing program could grow or expand. Now, we also included a look at the graduate level because we are very aware that feeder programs are often a viable source of revenue and enrollment growth. So we thought it would be good to know that occupational and physical therapy in particular show real promise. And finally, in terms of emerging trends, we are suggesting some people take a real close look or keep an eye on kinesiotherapy, kinesiology, and exercise physiology. But now let's dive into some of these with a little bit more detail. These next couple of slides are all going to look a little bit similar, but so we'll go through them each at a time. But on the right, you're going to see a breakout of the degree conferrals over time, as well as the expected change in job openings for related positions at the national level. I don't want to read all these to you, so I'm going to bring up the summary, highlight a few key points, and then give people a moment to review the information. But we're going to begin with sport leadership and management, as you can see here. The key takeaway is that we expect plenty of jobs in this field in the coming years. So there's going to be lots of great opportunity here. So something to think about, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail later, but ways to think about maybe differentiating your program or setting it apart, twofold. One, make sure it's accredited by the Association to Advance Collegiate Schools of Business, and B, provide specific tracks student athletes can leverage to focus their studies within sports leadership, such as analytics or communication. Next, we have public relations, still a really, really hot field and particularly favorable for those individuals with advanced technical and digital prowess. Navigating in the future things like social media and online brand are going to be incredibly important. So making sure they're integrated in the curriculum is going to be a great idea. And finally, just because I thought this was interesting, if not a little bit humorous, a lot of economic viability in Canada. So for those of you interested in recruiting from our great northern neighbor, keep that in mind. I'll leave this up for one more second so you can look at the data. All right, moving on. Here is a look at marketing, and the numbers continue to also go up. If you look on the right, national employment projections clearly show a need for market and marketing analysts. And I'm also sure this is not going to surprise anyone, but marketing and market research skills are expected to be heavily sought over within the pharmaceutical industries. All right, now we're moving into the graduate level opportunities as we examine physical therapy. Simply put, individuals really need a doctorate to pursue an ideal career in this field, and there just aren't enough program offerings right now, both to satisfy the number of students who want to enter the field, and also not enough people to fill all the vacancies or job openings we expect that are going to be available in the next decade. And that's for a variety of reasons that's going to happen, but mostly an aging population who's going to need more of these types of skills to take care of them. And the final academic field we wanted to at least highlight here and give an overview of is occupational therapy. Here we see growth at both the master's and doctoral levels, so there's a lot of general opportunity here. And the reasons for that are similar to physical therapy. We have an aging population, and more people can take advantage of OT resources through the Affordable Care Act. Now, as we sort of conclude the scan portion of this, I do want to stress again that this information is meant to be directional. We would never recommend making a final decision about whether to start, grow, or pause a program on this data alone. Instead, this is the output of the initial scan and meant to highlight some solid opportunities that might warrant future research with a closer, more focused examination. And that's exactly where a true market analysis happens or begins, as opposed to the scan, which is sort of that step one I was talking about that we were previously discussing. So as we move forward, we're going to be talking more about examples of things you could do next, not necessarily data that you could probably use right out of the gate from this presentation alone. So let's go over the methodology for a more targeted market analysis. Here's the methodology. You can see a lot of the same data sources and lenses are similar, but with this kind of research, we're simply taking a more targeted approach. For example, if you were going to take a closer look at labor market demand, you might also review local job posting trends to understand who's hiring in the region and the types of skills those employers are seeking. Or you may do a more comprehensive evaluation of elements like licensure requirements for that industry. But the one new important category I want to highlight here is programmatic trends. And said differently, it's important to evaluate the competitive landscape for a program of interest. It's great if it looks like students are interested in it and there's going to be a lot of job openings in related fields. But if everyone in your backyard is also offering it, then there has to be some consideration on how to proceed. What will your program do to differentiate itself? Will it try to attract a particular kind of student? Will it be faster to complete, cheaper, more flexible, et cetera, et cetera? And the best way to make that determination is to understand what you might be up against from a competition standpoint. So these next two slides are simply examples of information that might help you assess the competitive landscape. They come from projects we've done previously with other members. So the goal here isn't to use this data, but rather get a sense for what might be useful when trying to think about market positioning. For example, when we were doing this assessment of public relations programs, we really wanted to highlight length of the program in the upper right, along with tuition and number of courses in the lower right, to give a sense of the scales of the continuum related to cost and duration. This slide represents another facet of competitive benchmarking, namely taking a look at the curriculum trends. So in this case, the spotlight is on publicized offerings at Adelphi University and their sport management program. Here, you can quickly see the interdisciplinary nature of the offering, which allows students to specialize in particular areas, including emerging fields like esports. And this is where I'm actually going to take a pause and turn it over to Cheryl, who performed exactly this type of work to evaluate a program at St. Leo University. So Cheryl, I'm going to turn the proceedings over to you and just let me know when you want me to advance the slide deck.
Okay, thanks, Fox. So my name is Cheryl Hemphill. I work with St. Leo University. And what we have done in this particular case is we did a market analysis on the Bachelor of Arts in Marketing. So when we look at these market analysis, we use them in two different ways. One of the ways we use them is to look at the annual program review. In this particular case, or the academic program review, which we have an established marketing program. And so we're just looking at the program every 5 years or so to see what we want to do to improve upon our program. Do we want to discontinue the program, et cetera? The other way we use the market analysis is for new program proposals. So anecdotally, you may have heard, you talked with a colleague or went to a conference and heard that this next program is a new and up and coming program and you want to think about launching it at your university. So using these market analyses can help to start with the new program proposal process as well. So as we're going forward, I'm going to kind of be looking at these and talking about this through the lens of both. So just talking about both existing programs and new program proposals. So the first component that we would look at is student demand. So once again, as Fox had said, are students interested in these programs? Are they coming in and taking these courses, and are they graduating with these degrees? So the degrees are normally classified using zip codes, or programs are coded into certain codes. And I do have to say that most of us know that the codes are a little fuzzy. There's no hard, fast rule for how programs can be coded. So the way that my marketing program may be coded may not be exactly the same as your marketing program is coded. So when we take a look at it, we actually cast a wider net. And so if we're looking at marketing, we don't just say we're only going to look at the general marketing program. We're actually going to look at conferrals and more programs that are marketing related. So we're looking at not just general marketing, but sales and distribution and operations, even though that might not be part of our program. And we also include those others, because there's always some programs that end up getting dropped in those other programs or other codes. So it's important to look at those as well and not to limit what you're looking at. The other thing that we look at is the total number of degree completions. We break it down by usually by state, region, and nationally. So in a particular case, if we're looking to launch a program in Florida, we're looking to launch it primarily at our campus. We might focus specifically on the number of conferrals within Florida. If there's very few, then it could be that there are no competitors in our area where we might want to launch that. So we might want to launch the program. Or it could be that there may not be student interest. And this is a case where we would need to dive a little bit further into that. Then also looking at the southeastern, regional, and also the national levels. So if we're recruiting from across the United States, are there jobs and are there occupations that our students can go back to? So are students from these other areas looking to confer and to take these marketing or other programs? Just looking at the growth rate. So usually if the growth rate in this particular program is greater than all fields, which is about 2%. So that's usually pretty good. So we're looking at 3%, 6%, 5%. So it is showing that students are continually interested in marketing programs overall. Also, one thing before we switch the slides, I did want to mention, so in the notation and the analysis, there's one thing that Hanover had mentioned about the changing field of marketing and how real world experience is going to be important going forward. And I just wanted to mention that and bring that up, and we're going to circle back to that in just a few minutes. So the next part that we look at is the labor market. So in general, are our graduates going to have a job when they graduate, when they get our degree? Are we providing a degree that our students can go out and participate in these particular occupations? So as Fox had also mentioned, the NCES, or the National Center for Education Statistics, has come up with a crosswalk. So they would say, if you get a degree in this particular program, you will be able to get a job in this particular occupation. I always pick on accounting because those are pretty cut and dry. If you get an accounting degree, then most likely you're going to get a job with some type of accounting occupation. But if you think about in my office in institutional research, I come from a business background, but to be honest, I didn't know that I was going to get a job in institutional research. And when you look at the spread of the occupations or the degrees that the people in our office have, it's a very wide variety. We have people in our office that have history degrees, sociology, psychology, fine arts, writing, education, HR. So there's no real hard, fast rule to say, if you get a marketing degree, you must work in a marketing field. However, that being said, we have to be a little bit more narrow. So once again, we take a look at those crosswalks to say, if you get a degree in marketing, these are the occupations you would most likely be able to get a job in. So some of those marketing jobs, like a marketing analyst, marketing specialist, marketing managers, and are those occupations projected by the Bureau of Labor Statistics to grow or decline over the next 10 years. So as we can see here, marketing is a growing field. Just looking at the total labor market, and you can see that, so the job, once again, it's a growing field, and they expect the jobs to increase over the next 10 years. Once again, even though COVID hasn't been factored into this data yet, it's still expected that it's going to be a strong field. Another piece that they have also mentioned there is talking about skills and digital. So digital marketing is one of those skills that will be important going forward. They talk about internet-based advertising is a growing portion. And once again, that kind of ties into what we had talked about, and we're going to circle back to that as well. So the next piece that we look at, and this is really great to look at in the Hanover analysis, is the real-time job postings. So we look at some of those job titles. Once again, if you were to get a marketing degree, what job titles would our graduates be looking for? So they could be looking at sales managers, marketing assistants, specialists. The other thing that we look at is the education requirements that are posted in real-time job postings. Just a key point, a lot of job postings don't specify what type of degree they're looking for, but of those that do, so you can see the majority in this particular case are looking for bachelor's degrees. It's really more important when you're looking at developing a master's degree. If you take a look and you see that the majority of job postings are looking for bachelor's, then you would have to consider, as you're thinking about doing a master's degree, is this something that's going to make our graduates more marketable? Is it going to advance them in their careers? Or is it really that they can go in with a bachelor's degree and that's all they really need? So it's important to look at the educational requirements for whatever occupations our graduates are looking for. The other thing, and this is where we're going to come full circle now, just talking about skills. So this is something that's important for two different reasons. When we're looking at our existing programs, for example, we're looking at a marketing program. We've had a marketing program for a while. So what can we do to improve our program? What can we do with our program to make it more robust, to give our graduates possibly a wage premium or give them a competitive advantage? And in this particular case, one of the things that they have discovered looking at this top credentials and skills is one of the top skills is digital marketing. So if we did not have that track in our marketing program, this might be something to say, well, it looks like that our graduates might need digital marketing. So in order to improve our program, maybe we want to add a digital marketing track to the program to make it more attractive or to improve our program. The same thing to set it up as a differentiator. So if you're looking at your competitors and you see that nobody else is offering a digital marketing track, then there's something that can make your program different and more attractive to your graduates or to other students and potential students to come to your university. The other thing then to talk about is the employers. So they've listed some of the top employers in the Southeast. If you remember back a couple of slides, they talked about how the marketing landscape is changing and real world experience is going to be important for our graduates. And so this is where you can talk about looking at those employers and thinking about real world experience. Number one, where is good places to place our graduates going forward? But maybe looking at some of these employers to say, who do we already have partnerships with, or who could we approach that we might be able to establish internships with that can give our graduates or our potential graduates real world experience in order to give them a leg up in the marketplace or to make them more competitive. So then the last thing we just kind of look at, as Fox had talked about, looking at our competitors and the marketing program trends that are out there. So once again, looking especially if we're looking to develop a new program, what is the average credit requirements? And obviously, if there's 34 credit requirement across most universities and we want to require 50, maybe not. So just kind of looking at what our competitors are offering in terms of credit requirements, what type of curriculum are they offering? So is it, especially if you're looking at offering a program and you have someone 100 miles away that's offering the same program, is something in the curriculum different that might make your program more attractive to students or attract a certain type of students, for example, student athletes? Same thing looking at specializations. So are our competitors offering specializations that would be attractive to the students that we would like to recruit? Another thing to look at is the delivery format. So in this particular case, 9 of the 10 benchmark programs only offered these programs on campus. So is there an opportunity for an online program? Is that something that you have the ability to do? Is something that is attractive, or is something that you might want to make available to your students, especially in terms of a graduate level program? And then finally, tuition. Once again, a lot of times our campus programs, the tuition is pretty much set. There's not too much that is going to differentiate from program to program or university to university. But more so on a graduate program level, we found that graduate programs can be priced differently. So just looking at the pricing when they're looking at setting tuition for your programs, just looking at what the competitors have and how other programs look. So those are the 4 pieces that we look at when we look at the market analysis and the reports and the data that's provided by Hanover. But how I wanted to conclude was just talking about what do we do with this once we've looked at all this data. As I had said, with the new program or the existing program proposal, we use that to make program improvements, or we may have looked at the market analysis and we see that the conferral rates are going down and occupation rates are going down for all of those. Maybe we want to discontinue the program altogether. But then again, maybe that as with marketing, where it's continuing to go up, students are still interested, the occupations are growing. Maybe we just need a differentiator to, like that digital marketing, to add additional track in order to make it more attractive to potential students. That's with existing programs. If we're looking to do a new program, one of the things we do with the new program proposal process is we take an initial look to see, using a market analysis, to see if this program would be viable. If it is, then it becomes a much larger process. This market research is a big piece of a much larger process to look at, is the program going to be viable at our university? Do we have the resources? Is it going to bring in the amount of revenue in order to offset the resources that we need for this program? Do we have once again, can we differentiate our program from others? How can it bring value to the university? And how can it bring value to the students that we want to recruit? And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Fox.
Thank you, Cheryl. But we're going to conclude with a very forward-looking perspective, beyond the research we've highlighted here. As I mentioned in the opening, in many cases, all the secondary research you can do might only take an assessment so far. In those instances, it is sometimes prudent to complement your understanding of the market with primary research. This is especially true with super emerging fields where there is no historical data to analyze as of yet. Someday there may be a zip code related to esport management, but it's not quite there yet. So how do you look into that a little bit further? At those times, talking to students directly can be incredibly valuable. Asking them directly through a survey, for instance, if we offered this program, would you be interested? What qualities are most important to you? Is it cost, reputation, format, length, things like that. And that's for the student demand side of it, but the same is possible for the labor market demand, to make sure that assessment is as robust as possible. If you want to get ahead of the curve in a particular field, having discussions with employers about what they think the skills of the future are going to be in their field is a great way to stay cutting edge. Because with that insight, an institution can begin constructing a curriculum that will teach students exactly what they need to know to prepare them for the future economy. Simply put, these types of primary research analyses can make any market assessment more comprehensive and complete. But that is the end of our material. We went through our philosophy and our proposed approach to assessing viability and feasibility for academic programs with the lens towards programs that student athletes would be interested in. We got to give you our results of our preliminary opportunity scan, and then hopefully you've gotten some suggestions on how to continue the evaluation of an academic program assessment through targeted secondary research or primary research. And so with that, we're going to take a pause here, and we'll gladly take your questions as long as we can. I can get the ball rolling. I do see a couple questions in here about the value of how do you analyze the value of undergraduate and graduate certificates. So I'll speak to that, Sharon, if you want to jump in as well. First of all, just to be clear, a lot of what we talked about here in terms of the assessment of using existing student demand data from IPREDS and existing BLS data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, things like that, that you can do that at the certificate level. So there is coding in there that you could do similar assessments to look at trends. But if you're actually asking about true value, that's again where I think maybe more primary research is going to come in handy. Ask, first of all, is it valuable to the student? Asking them what their perceptions are of a certificate, and hopefully understanding how they perceive it. But then also talking to employers directly and asking them, what do you feel about how would you, hire somebody with a certificate over undergraduate, bachelor's degree, things like that. The other piece of data that Cheryl even said is out there. You can look at the job postings a little bit more closely. I got to be honest with you, depending on the tool you're using, it may not be the best way to do that. You may have to get a little bit more manual, as it were, like get granular and look at those postings. But those are my initial thoughts. Cheryl, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Certificates has always been tough. We get those questions in terms of looking at minors and looking at certificates, and it's really tough to get a real feel for student demand because a lot of that's not really tracked, especially in terms of minors. They do track certificates, but it is a little bit tougher to determine with the student demand. So I agree with Fox, talking to students and understanding their perception of what a certificate means and the value of a certificate, and then also talking to employers to see if they're accepting of certificates and if they find value in that as well would be important.
Awesome. The next question we got in is regarding, how do you measure change? How do you measure if the changes in your program offerings are the things that led to enrollment? There's often this anecdotal correlation, but is it really causation? It's a great question. Honestly, once again, not to be too much of a broken record, but this is where almost always you're going to want to use primary research. You're going to want to talk to the students who entered your program and find out why they did that. So we do a lot of studies at Hanover we call student choice surveys, and essentially what we do is as soon as a student once the admission cycle or the enrollment cycle is concluded, people have made the decisions, we actually reach out to both those who said yes and those who said no and ask them questions about their experience. And one of those questions oftentimes is about, focused on a particular program, like, well, why did you come here? What was it that attracted you to the program? And you can layer in those variables that are the recent changes or modifications to your program. And at the same time, if you talk to the students who said no, finding out their rationale for why they didn't do that may also give you insight into, okay, what is driving the ultimate decision. So that's probably the best way to do that. When our institution's employment and career center data is aggregated to include all student support governors and other agencies, what methods can we use to gather data on just student athletes in our athletics department? Oh, survey. That's probably the best way to do it. Either at and I really am a big fan of pre and post, so that, getting data on those individuals at the beginning and making sure they're well coded in your CMS so you can run reports on them, and then post data after they graduate and keeping up on them. Again, that's sort of, if you're collecting that data already, awesome. I don't know what the intake forms are at your institution, but you can sort of make that part of the intro process. If there's certain things you want to ask specifically of student athletes, as they come in, set something up that's pretty easy to have an intake form. or, do something, somewhere throughout their educational career to target them, ask them the questions you want to know, and then code that and maintain it going forward. That's probably the best way you can do it, because I get that it's not always easy.
Fox, Cheryl, on those lines, we talk a lot at the NCAA about partnerships, particularly on campus, and making sure that different units on campus are working together. Any suggestions, particularly in the athletic department, especially when working with institutional research, any thoughts about how we can create best practices to allow those partnerships to occur? To have, again, as you've heard many times, the student athlete population may be a little bit different than our student population. And so, is there any suggestions for best practices working with student athletes, working with the athletic department, and perhaps creating more partnerships with institutional research or other groups on campus who may have this information?
Yeah, I think one of the best things to do is to get to know institutional research, find out who that body is on your campus, and get to know them. So many times people don't know what the institutional research office does, and we collect a lot of data, and a lot of times we have data that people don't know about. But to be honest, we don't have time to generate reports and put out reports for people that are not interested. So it is helpful, especially if you're looking for that information, or if you're interested in programs, or if you're interested in student data. A lot of times, if you provide them with a list of your athletes, or sometimes in the student information system, you have them already coded as athletes, we can pull that information out and we can give you data that's specific to your athletes, in terms of just demographics, or other information, or information how they may have answered particular surveys, or we can survey the athletes for you. So it's good to have a partnership with IR. Just a lot of times you just really don't understand what IR does, with the exception of they send out a lot of surveys.
I'll echo that real quick, Cheryl, and say, I think the key thing that I would say is always start with the research question. What is it that you need to know? What is it that you're trying to answer or ascertain? Because if you can understand that, if you can say, I need to know this to make an informed decision, then people like Cheryl in the IR department can work backwards from that and say, okay, if that's the question you're trying to answer, what data do you need? And if they understand what data you need, they can do what we kind of were talking about today, is you can determine, well, does the data exist? Great, we'll use secondary research. Does the data not exist? Great, we'll use primary research. So that's my piece to contribute, is always focus on the research questions as your guiding point.
Thank you both for that. Just a follow-up question, and this one's for Fox. If you were to, and obviously we have a number of institutions that are just getting their hands around this data, and they're trying to figure out, what's a good place to start. If you're talking with a novice, obviously you mentioned about getting in contact with institutional research, but if you have a institution, athletic department that's trying to get something like this kicked off for their student athlete population, any suggestions on the first place to start and how we can help them understand kind of how to move forward?
Certainly. So again, always step one, as I just said, I'll say it again because it's just so gosh darn important, is decide, what the goal is and what you need to know to get there. Determine what those questions are. Then sort of, think about your comfort level with going out and getting that data on your own. A lot of the data we talked about today is publicly available. So like the information we were talking about, degree conferral trends and, job openings and BLS stats and things like that, that's out there. You got to go to those sites. Now, unfortunately, those databases are not in, let's say, the most friendly of formats, but you could pull all that data. You could go out there and get it. And if you have someone who's tech savvy, that's sort of step one. You could just go at it yourself. Your next step is, go to institutional research and, ask for their help and see, if they're willing to help you out and guide you. They are all lovely people. I've only met great institutional researchers throughout my life. So that's probably your next bet. And then obviously, the third option is to get, some sort of external help. And that's sort of like what Hanover does. We don't take the place of institutional research departments. We come in and help them. They're basically outsourcing some of the stuff that they know they need to get done, that they can take off their plate and put it on us, because we're happy to do that, that grunt work and organize the data and hopefully make it presentable. So that's sort of the progression there is, define what you need to know, determine if you feel like you can go out and do it yourself, because in many cases, the raw data is out there. Go to institutional research. And if not, there's people like data geeks like myself who are more than willing to help out if need be.
And it's possible that your IR department at your university may already have a partnership with Hanover. So they may be able to already have those relationships in place in order to facilitate any type of project.
That's great information. And one other thing I wanted to share, and shout out to our NCAA research department because they pointed this out. I know you both talked about iPads and getting some of the data from iPads. For our member institutions in divisions 1 and 2, that information is in your IPP data management system. So in terms of information about majors, looking at your sport offering, gender, ethnicity, all that data about your student athletes and the majors that they are in is in our NCAA IPP webpage. So just a note to everyone it can be a little bit easier than you even think it would be to gather that information because you're at a starting point. Still want you to partner with institutional research, but I want you all to know, especially in the athletic department, that information may be at your fingertips. Fox, Cheryl, anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, I mean, just in case there are no other questions, I'll just say thanks very much for this opportunity. We had a lot of fun, approaching this sort of topic from hopefully a little bit of a unique angle and talking about academic development. Please, if you do have questions about what you saw today and you want to, I'll speak for myself. I'll let Cheryl do the same. Feel free to reach out to me. I don't mind if I think my contact information is probably somewhere out there. You could ask me questions about anything you saw today. I'd be more than happy to answer them. I really love talking about this stuff. So, it's my goal to make sure you are as informed as possible about, the opportunities that may exist for academic development and taking what I would call a systematic research approach. So just want to thank Troy and everyone at NCAA and Cheryl for the opportunity. And I could say I had a whole bunch of fun putting this together. So thank you again.
And I'd just like to thank Hanover for inviting me to join in on this process. This was just a lot of fun. It was really enjoyable to be able to present. And it's always exciting when people are interested in looking at data and they're excited about learning and have questions about the data. And so I'm happy if anybody has questions about the data as well, you feel free to contact me. And yeah, I'm always excited to talk about data. So.
Well, Cheryl and Fox, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate this. And, one of the things that's important to us, especially as folks are not only understanding their own data on campus, but we want to continue to provide these opportunities, if you will, to not only share best practices. So if there are institutions out there that have had success and would like to share information about how they're working with their student athletes, particularly in the area of providing opportunities after their collegiate careers are over. This is a great venue, and we always want to get this information out. My staff and I really look forward to not only getting this in the hands of our membership, but also creating opportunities so that you can meet some of our partners and others who are out there to get this information out. There are a number of other opportunities that are going to be coming up over the next month or two regarding opportunities to have other virtual sessions. Here's a list. We're finalizing a couple of these opportunities here in the next couple of weeks, so we'll update this and get this out to you all as soon as possible. If there are individuals that you think might be interested in this information, feel free, once you have it, to share it with others who you think might be interested. But again, I want to thank Cheryl and Fox for presenting today. They did a great job. You can see in front of you on the screen, you have Fox and Cheryl's contact information if you want to reach out to them directly. And we really want to appreciate everyone taking the time today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for being a part of the presentation. Take care, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Take care.
Thank you.